Hi everyone and welcome to my studio. It's Diane here, and today I'm going to be comparing a sheet of Arches paper and Viviva watercolour paper. I'm going to be using a demanding technique of thick, intense paint and heavy scratching out in order to put the paper through its paces. So let's get started. So today I'm going to do a little snowy scene somewhere across between autumn and winter that would be nice for a card, or just as a nice little picture, or just for the heck of it, just for the fun of it. And what I'm going to do is I've got 4 different shades of blue here in front of me. I've got phthalo blue, which is this one, that's cobalt blue, this is ultramarine, and that's Windsor violet. And I'm just going to wet them a bit so that they loosen up a bit, and I'm just going to pretty much randomly make a nice thick wash of different blues on this paper, and I'm just going to really, gives you quite a thrill to pick up these colours and just put them on the paper. I'm using a little Viviva sketchbook here, which has got a kind of paper in it which is sort of smooth. It's meant to be watercolour paper. It's a little bit on the smooth side, but it's quite nice for this. So I'm just really slathering on the paint, nice and thick, because what we're going to do is some scratching out. And so we need plenty of paint. Not too wet. I haven't done wet in wet. I've just put lots of paint on the paper. I haven't gone up to the edges. You could if you wanted to. But since this is a sketchbook, I'm just going to do it like that. Now I'm going to put my brush down, and to scratch out, I've got a choice of various different implements here, and I'll just show you some of the things that I might use to scratch out with. This is a large flat brush. It's a 1-inch flat by Daler, but it's got a handle which has been deliberately cut off at the end to make a kind of scratchy point, which is quite nice, and I occasionally use that. You could use a palette knife to scratch with as well, if you happen to have one. That's quite a handy thing. This is just a credit card cut up to give me different angles and shapes, and I can scratch with that either with the point or with the side of that, and that gives me also different options. This is a bone folder. This is for smoothing paper when you're making cards, and that does a nice scratching job too. If you want something really sharp, you can use a knife. This is a scalpel. I keep a rubber stuck on the end of it to make sure it doesn't hurt anybody. That's good. And also my glass pen. That's an option as well for drawing into the paint. So we've got lots of different things to choose from there, and I'm sure you'll be able to think of a few other ones as well. There are plenty of other options. So I'm just going to start perhaps with this and see how this goes. I haven't used this particular brush for doing this for a while. And what we're doing is we're going to scratch in, and I'm going to add some more paint because it's dried a little bit too much. That's not a problem, just add a bit more down here. And this, I would say, is my practice piece. So we're just going to scratch in like that. And then I'm going to try all these different scratchy things and see how they behave. Let's do something really sharp. And then we could come back in with some darker blue in the places where it's darkest. And let's try this one. That's a bit too fine. What I want to do is I want to achieve some nice, a few nice broad lines as well as lots of narrow ones. And I think I might go for some black. And then I've got some white ink. So I'm going to use my pen, my glass pen, and I'm going to try to draw in a seed head with this. So you know the kind of thing. I don't know if this is going to work. Perhaps it's not dry enough. Maybe I won't use the pen, perhaps I'll use a brush. Perhaps I'll use a rigger. Let's see if that works. So we're just drawing in, it's like, what is it called? Cow parsley, or one of those hogweed type things, which has these. And then I want to put some splashes on. Some more snow. And then some spatter in black and violet. See how that looks. And what we need to do now is just let it dry and then come in with a bit more white, probably, I expect. So I'm just dropping in some white ink dots, which are the seed heads on the ends of these little stems and stalks and things that are sticking out. And this is, you could say, a bit of an experimental painting. You never know how things are going to turn out. You never know whether it was worth doing, whether it was worth wasting a piece of paper on that. And anyone who tells you otherwise is not telling the truth, because painting, if you can predict what's going to happen, then you're not actually paying attention, basically. This white ink by Winsor & Newton's quite nice. I think it's nicer than white gouache. And just put a couple more white lines in there like that, and I'm going to do one more spatter with white, and then I think I'm going to call that a day. So here is the painting that I just did on A5. That's a half of an 8 by 11 or 8 by 10 or whatever sheet, and that's what I have achieved. And now on the Viviva paper, so now I'm going to go ahead and do something very similar on the same size piece of paper, which is arches this time. So this is a comparison of Viviva watercolour paper and Arches 140-pound cold pressed watercolour paper, and we'll see what difference it makes, whether it makes it easier or harder or doesn't make any difference at all. So I'm using the same paints as I used before. I'm using the same brush, and I didn't mention which brush it was, did I? This is a size 10 ZEN ART black tulip brush, a round nylon brush, a bog standard kind of watercolour brush, in fact. And so here we go. Let's do the same thing. I'll try and remember exactly what I did. I was very random with the paint. I've already got this paint watered down a little bit, so it's mobile. And the first thing you notice when you start to work on arches rather than Viviva is that the texture, there's much more texture and there's much more flow. The paint flows differently. It sort of sinks in a bit more, I think, rather than sitting on the surface. And you get sort of bleeds between the strokes. So I'll just try and make that more or less the same size as before. It should be, because the paper is, that's a little bit bigger, so a tiny bit bigger. So in other words, the Viviva paper isn't even half A4. It's a bit smaller than that. So anyway, so roughly plenty of paint on there. Just randomly. A little bit of mauve up there, a bit more cobalt down the bottom. Doesn't matter at all. And I've got the same scraping implements, and just for the sake of information, we have here, the model for this. That's what we're using. Multiple stems coming out of a head and a spider. Oh, hello, spider. yeah, so you can see what we're trying to aim for there. The one I was doing before had more kind of dots on the ends of these things, but that's just artistic license there. Right, so before everything dries too much, let me think. So we started off scratching with this, and you can see straight away that's made a much more intense impression. And where's my IKEA card? Let's see how that works to give us a stem. Okay, now I do want to try these other things, although they might not work as well. Now that's wetter there because these lines are coming in dark. It's not actually pushing it away. So let's try that. That's a bit too flexible, although that's quite nice. That's fairly uncontrollable because it's a bit too flexible. Let's try this one. That's pretty good. I need to make that bigger though. Okay. And it's quite wet up here still, so I'm going to have to wait probably, although when you scrape into it when it's wet, you do get a different effect. It does do something. Okay, let's try the scalpel. Try the scalpel for the getting a mixture of light lines and dark lines there, depending on how wet it is. When it starts to dry, you get whiter lines. Okay, I would say that this was quite responsive to the scratching process. And you can come back and scratch a bit more. It doesn't have to be completely random. You've actually got quite a bit of control over these scratched out lines. And now we need to go ahead and come in with some of the ink. So let's use the rigger. This is again ZEN ART Faux Squirrel Black Tulip brush, and we'll start there with the center where all of the little stems come out from. And then I'm just going to sort of emphasize the rough texture of the stems. Again, the Arches paper has more tooth, more, they call it tooth, don't they? Texture. That word again. sit down. I want to just go a little bit more carefully over, whoops, not quite like that, over some of these lines or beside them in the light places. And once you've started to put in the lights, you can come in again with the blue and make darker areas. And something I noticed in the first one was that I had sort of accidentally got some quite nice areas just behind here, which were really dark. So we'll try and do that again. And I think at this point in the last one, at this stage, I did some white spatter. To indicate snow. And then I did little clusters. Because when these seeds are a little bit less dried out, mine are very dried out because I think they're from about 5 or 7 years ago. When they're not so dried out, they do have little things, seeds, I guess. I've got Columbo going through my head at the moment as I'm doing this because I just watched part of an episode of Columbo from 1974 where Johnny Cash was playing the guy who'd committed the murder. And it's quite entertaining. I've kind of got that running through my head while I'm doing this, which isn't going to help really. Okay, so lots of little dots. And we'll just make this a little bit whiter, and we're going to have to let it dry and see what we've got. Okay, so this is now dry, and I'm just going to spatter on a little bit more snow to sort of bring it up to where the other painting was in terms of whiteness, and a few thin lines in general. And now we can compare the two. This one probably had a little bit more white there. So I think it's quite interesting actually. The initial wash went on much more interestingly on this one. But it must have sunk in more into the paper than this one did, probably because it's got more tooth. And then the white is harder to make it stand out on the same background, but harder to make it stand out than it was on this one, as it happens. although the scratching out went better on this one. In the end, the difference is minimal, very, very little difference. There's a slight difference in the colour of the paper. The arches is very slightly pinker, slightly, but you can't really see that, or creamier perhaps. You can't really see that very well on the camera. Maybe you can see that, which of course then that makes it a little bit harder to have the contrast on here. I think I probably should have had a little bit more paint coming out there at the edge, so I'll just add that in like that. Yeah, so there we are. Comparison of Viviva watercolour paper, £140 or thereabouts, and the arches similar, £140, not cold pressed. That is to say, they both are the same. And for this particular painting, I would say that there was actually surprisingly little difference between them. So it's not always true that arches is the best. In fact, if anything, I think I slightly prefer the first one. But having said that, it's almost always the case that the first time you do a subject, it turns out better than the second time when you try to do it again, which is why when I do my tutorials, I try to film myself doing it for the very first time rather than doing it as a trial run and then filming it second time round, because on the whole I do find that my first try is often by far and away the best. So I will let you go now. Those are the final paintings. If you enjoyed this, please give me a like and subscribe. Don't forget to turn on notifications so that you hear when new things go up, and please do comment below. It really helps the channel be seen, and we do need that at the moment. Things are a little bit quiet on the YouTube front for everybody right now. So if you've watched it and enjoyed it, please let us know, and let YouTube know too. And don't forget to share. Sharing the video or just putting it on your clipboard on YouTube counts for a lot. And if you get a chance to go and have a look at DianeAntone.com, over there you have free downloads of sketches for all of the videos that we've done over the last year. So that's there for your pleasure. So I look forward to seeing you over there. And for now, I'll say bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.